Good evening, everyone, and I want to start out by first thanking you for this invitation to speak with you this evening. As you know, I was the consultant that was asked to come in to perform the Title IX review of your 9 high schools, and it did really become a labor of love for me. It consumed pretty much 14 months of my life, and it was truly an experience for myself, and it was a pleasurable one. I don't want you to think that it was a tough task. It was a tough task in terms of what it entailed, but it was truly a great experience for me. What I'd like to do this evening is give you a very brief tutorial, if you will, of the compliance framework of the law, and then share with you what I saw and what I'm recommending to the district. And again, I'll say this towards the end of the presentation, I commend the district for taking this step. This is a phenomenal decision on your part to look at yourself, so to speak. So I truly commend the district. As in all of my presentations, I do have a disclaimer that this is not a substitute for legal advice. I'm not an attorney. I am a high school athletic director of 20 years, public educator of 30 years. I have a passion for the law. I've been working with the law for the last 17 years. I feel that I'm a child of Title IX, so to speak, going through high school in the mid-'70s, and as I graduated from high school and went into college, began to feel the benefits of what Title IX law has done for females in education. So I just want to make sure I make that disclaimer. The points or the areas that I reviewed, again, this is a brief tutorial, if you will, of the law and how it applies to athletics and the things that I looked at. And I did provide most of you with a handout, an additional handout, which at the top it says Title IX Compliance Framework. And this may help guide you a little bit further with some of the things that I did look at. There are basically 3 components to the law as it applies to athletics. And one of those components does not apply to high schools, and that's the component of scholarships. But Component 1 and Component 3 are applicable to high schools. And those are the components that I looked at, the first one being participation opportunities, and that's where we see come into play something called a 3-pronged test. And on your handout, it does outline that 3-pronged test, and a school only needs to meet one of those 3 prongs. And I'll get into more detail about how the high schools fell into those 3 prongs. The second component that I looked at was equivalence of other benefits and opportunities, and that's really 11 program areas. It's kind of a laundry list, if you will. And again, if you refer to your handout, that last component at the bottom highlights or lists the areas that I took a look at in each school. That acronym, Playing Fair, is not to the letter of the law. That is an acronym that Dr. Lee Green developed to help us remember those 11 program areas. And Dr. Green is a law professor at Baker University in Kansas, and I work very close with Dr. Green through the NIAAA and through our legal issues courses that we teach together. So it's kind of a little help us remember those areas. Now, not all 11 of those 11 program areas do applies to high schools, and again, we'll review some of those as well. Then you go to the next slide. I looked at the 9 high schools. I reviewed the information. I did some site visits. There were quite a few questionnaires that were completed by student athletes, by coaches, by athletic directors, by athletic trainers, by strength and conditioning coaches. So that provided me with a lot of information. There was a list of data collection items, about 22 items that each school was asked to provide to me. I conducted some interviews with some of the athletic personnel and some of the administration, and the 9 high schools are obviously listed there. So if I could begin with some of the major issues and concerns that I saw that kind of jumped out at me as I reviewed the information, did the site visits. I would want to begin with the area of accommodations of athletic interests and abilities for females. And again, if you would refer to your handout, you might want to keep that handy. That would be that first component. And looking at that three-prong test, and looking at those three prongs, and I went through each prong to see and analyze how each high school matched up to those prongs. All 9 high schools showed a significant disparity with regard to substantial proportionality. Again, if you refer to the handout, substantial proportionality refers to the ratios of male athletic participation and female athletic participation, which must be substantially proportionate to the ratios of male enrollment and female enrollment. So when you crunch the numbers and break down the numbers, and I compared the female enrollment, school enrollment, to the female athletic participation at each school, there was great disparity. If the OCR was to come in here and do an audit, Office for Civil Rights, which is the enforcement arm, if you will, of Title IX law, they would look at your proportionality and see quite a discrepancy, and their limits are really 3 to 5%. And the report lists each school, and the lowest percentage that I found for females, the disparity was 7%. That's still over that 3 to 5% range that the OCR would give. And unfortunately, the highest percentage rate for females was 24%. And I don't want to pick out individual schools. I can just tell you that all 9 high schools had disparity concerns when it came to substantial proportionality. Again, if a school does not meet substantial proportionality, they can go to the next prong, and the next prong would be program expansion. Can a school show that in the very recent past it has expanded its program offerings to female students? And when I looked at all the 9 high schools, there were 2 or 3 that could meet that prong. And I'm going to actually cite some of the schools. Alderdice cited that they had a girls lacrosse club, but at the time when I analyzed the data, it was unclear whether or not that would be elevated at some point to a varsity sport. And I don't know if that has changed since the report was done. Carrick indicated that they had girls rugby as a club sport. However, the possible issue with that is that rugby is not a PIAA sport, so it may fulfill that prong, it may not. Langley did incorporate their girls soccer program in 2007, 2008. I believe at one time they were co-ed, and then they split in 07 and 08, so they would fulfill or meet that prong. The OCR, again, will look at the very recent past, the last 3 to 5 years. Perry added girls swimming in 07 and 08. And the other schools, I could not find any indication that there was going to be any kind of program expansion in the very near future. So again, if they didn't meet the substantial proportionality prong, they didn't meet the program expansion prong, they still have a third prong that they could possibly meet, and that's the accommodating the interests and abilities, the full and effective accommodation of interests and abilities of the students. And generally speaking, that can be accomplished through a student survey. And we did run a student survey with Mike Gavlick's help. We ran it on an instrument called SurveyMonkey. We used a standard survey that I like to use. It is an open-ended survey. It's sometimes difficult to analyze because it is so lengthy and wordy. But out of the total number, and again, this was to be administered to all the students in all the schools, not just the kids who play sports, but all the students. And out of the student population, we only got an 11% response. So to me, that didn't necessarily fill that prong. And again, what you have to take into consideration is the fact that this is the first time the district's ever done anything like this. The kids may not have been understanding the process, so as we move forward and into the future, there has to be an educational component to this process to help students understand what this is about, to help staff members to understand what it's about, coaches to understand, athletic personnel. So again, the survey needs to be done again, in my opinion. It may need to be modified. We can look at modifying the survey to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit easier to analyze. And again, there needs to be a process to inform and educate students about the survey. What does it mean? How do you take the survey and those kinds of things. And I would have to say that is true in a number of the things that I saw, and the questionnaires was another piece. The questionnaires were rather lengthy, but the questionnaires have to address each component part of the Title IX compliance framework. So, students were completing questionnaires that were 30, 35 pages long, and that's tough. And again, for doing it the first time, as you move forward with this process, again, there's an educational component that needs to go with it to help kids understand, okay, this is what it is, this is why we're doing it, here's what it means. So for doing it the first time, it was not bad. I think we got some very good data out of it. Okay, can we go to the next slide. The next piece the other major issues and concerns would be in the area of that third component piece, the other benefits and opportunities for females. And the major areas of focus or concern with regard to that 11 program area are the 6 that are listed there, in my opinion. Now, in the actual report, each school is broken down separately. So each school will be listed, and then the 11 program areas analyzed in each school. So you would have to refer to the report to get specifics, but generally speaking, these were the red flags in my opinion when I looked at everything across the board. For example, the area of equipment and supplies, I think what needs to be done is there needs to be a more clear understanding, or we need to establish a clear budget, line item budget to accommodate all the teams in terms of necessary and appropriate equipment and uniforms in order to address any disparities among the teams. I think we need to, I could not find documentation of any type of inventory, equipment inventory, uniform inventory. I could not find evidence of any type of uniform rotation cycle in the schools, and that becomes a problem. If we're not tracking those things and being accountable to those things, we start losing sight and disparities occur. I think there needs to be a process in which we evaluate the specific equipment needs of girls' teams especially, in order to bring quality, quantity, and availability and suitability of the equipment in line with many of the boys' teams. And that's all part of that piece in equipment and supplies, the things that we need to look at. And also, I think there needs to be a process or a policy to oversee booster clubs and fundraising efforts. And I'm to understand that booster club policy is either in the works or has been completed, but there does need to be oversight of booster clubs. Not that the booster clubs in the schools are that active, but again, any outside resources that come into the program, no matter if it's from booster clubs or private donations or corporate sponsorships or alumni gifts, nothing in the law precludes a school from accepting those outside resources. However, if any of those outside resources create a disparity, the school has a duty to correct. And sometimes that's hard for folks to understand, but it's kind of like it doesn't matter where the money comes from, it's who's benefiting from it. And none of us want to look a gift horse in the mouth, especially in today's economic tough times, and we certainly don't want to discourage booster clubs. But there does need to be some type of monitoring of resources that come into the program. Locker rooms and practice and competition facilities. Again, I saw some disparity in some of the schools about with regards to practice schedules and the use of facilities in a fair and equitable way. I know a lot of the teams use city facilities. I mean, there's no doubt that the school district faces some challenges. I mean, that's the bottom line. There's a lot of challenges to face. Certainly the relationship with the city and using their facilities is a challenge, and making sure that those facilities are up to speed or equitable in comparison to facilities that might be on school property. And that will be a process for the school district and the city to work together on. I don't have an easy solution for that. Some of the things that I saw kind of took me off track a little bit, and it caused me to see a red flag in terms of risk management. And that would include some of the facilities, especially the outdoor facilities, in terms of safety and hazardous conditions. Although not a Title IX issue, I put my other hat on as a risk management person and just offer some caution with regards to the care and maintenance and safety of facilities. With regards to, and I'm only touching on the 6 that are listed, the other areas, the other 11 program areas, I saw either no disparity or it just didn't relate to high schools, things like recruiting and that kind of, those kinds of things. The other area was years of experience, quality, compensation, and assignment of coaches. I would suggest that the district take affirmative steps to recruit and encourage the best qualified coaches for girls' athletic programs, as well as recruit and encourage volunteer coaches. When I crunched some of the numbers and looked at years' experience and looked at the number of coaches, again, that drew a red flag in my opinion. You might want to choose to survey girls' coaches to determine which teams will benefit from volunteer coaches. Focus on recruitment efforts. You might want to interview female student athletes. That may be a very useful tool to find out what their concerns might be and what they're looking for. Make the same efforts to recruit and hire the best coaches for female teams as you might boys' teams. And again, I know it's tough to talk about some of these things given the economic times because, you know, obviously some of these changes that should be made require funding. But again, in the case of coaches, I think the district should consider adding coaching positions where the ratio of student athletes to coaches is greater than 10. Again, I kind of see that as a risk management issue as well. I would also offer that the district consider to have orientation and training programs for new coaches and mentoring for the first few years that they coach. I'm going to get into the whole athletic administration piece a little bit later and kind of weave that into the whole coaching piece as well, so I will come back to that. Under nature of publicity, marketing, media services for athletic programs, I saw some minor disparities in that area, and even though I know we can't control necessarily what the newspapers print in their newspaper, we all know that there are those high-profile sports. Some of that is driven by our societal view of sports and how our society values sports. But I think we can control what we do internally, and I think the district needs to reevaluate the things that are being done internally in terms of publicity for the various teams and student athletes. Certainly school publications and those types of things should probably be looked at for equity purposes. Again, I think it's important to celebrate all of our student athletes and all of our teams. You know, in my world, And some people may think my world is a little delusional, but in my world, irregardless, I believe that professional sports is entertainment, college sports is a business, and I think interscholastic athletics is education. And when you spin this, Title IX is not a sports law. It is not a sports law. It has been used mostly for sports, but it's an education law. And that was the genesis of the law. It came from an educational issue in academia. So I think we need to always look at our athletic programs as part of the educational process, and an integral part of the educational process. In a classroom, it's just a different type of classroom. It's an extension of our classrooms, and can be a very valuable tool for all of our students. Again, moving on, game and practice times and scheduling. I saw some disparity with regards to practice times, number of competitions, and the number of regular season competitions is significant, since the number of times a student athlete may compete is a major benefit. And in general, the more competitions, the greater the benefit. So I think it's important that, especially at the varsity level, that we make every effort we can to fill schedules, so that, and this is just an example, not that this is necessarily occurring, so that if boys basketball is playing 22 varsity games, girls basketball should be playing 22 games. And we need to look at those, some of those disparities. I think you should consider making available competition outside the City League for teams that are requesting to do so, and I kind of picked up on that through the student-athlete questionnaires, where they actually cited this team over here is playing outside the City League, but we are not. And it's kind of interesting what kids can pick up on. So I think we need to take a look at that. We need to reevaluate all the events' starting times to consider class schedule, meal times for student athletes, as well as the availability for spectator attendance. And I know that could be a challenge. I know that. But we need to look at that. And we need to ensure that all teams have access to practice facilities when their season is in session. We need to review all teams' preseason and postseason practice schedules and correct any evident disparities. And then finally, facilities for and access to training and medical services. Again, I saw this piece with regard to the athletic trainers probably more of a risk management concern than a Title IX concern. And I still made the comment in the report. I think the school district needs to consider, seriously evaluate the athletic training and medical coverage of its athletic programs. It's really impossible for one trainer to adequately and safely cover all athletic programs in 3 high schools, not only from a gender equity standpoint, but from a risk management standpoint as well. I think that some of the athletic personnel should establish an equitable, documented schedule for sports teams' use of the weight rooms. I saw that across the board in the various buildings. So any weight room facility, cardio room facility, conditioning room facility, I really didn't see any evidence of any kind of schedule. And I think that needs to be taken, needs to be looked at as well. As I was putting together the summary, I tried to keep a big picture view in my head. So I would offer some of these suggestions and recommendations. Designation of a Title IX compliance officer, and I know Dr. Lopez has that distinguished title. Came with a big pay raise and all that kind of stuff. And it's not uncommon for schools in most places to have a person designated as the Title IX compliance officer who wears many other hats. However, I think it would be beneficial for the district to consider designating a person who, if not has that sole responsibility, has that responsibility with a little less to do. And I don't want to step on Derek's toes and say something I shouldn't say, but it is such a big job. It really is. And it doesn't just deal with athletics. Title IX also includes sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is considered a part of sex discrimination. So, you know, again, something to consider. By law, every school must have a Title IX compliance officer. You do. It's a wonderful person. But with a school district of this size, you may want to consider that being the sole job, the sole duty. The development and implementation of a Title IX action plan. I am a fervent believer on planning, and getting your ducks in a row. And I truly believe that Title IX compliance must be a collaborative effort. And I believe in the committee notion. I think your stakeholders have to be involved and represented. And that is a daunting task for a district this size. So you may want to consider, as you go through the process of developing committees, to maybe develop committees by school, as opposed to having one big committee. But I think you really need to, I think the district really needs to come up with an action plan. I gave some suggestions in the report, some guidelines to follow, and I think that is absolutely your first step. Again, the booster organization, fundraising, guidance, and oversight, I mentioned that earlier, and I would encourage you to follow through with that. Perhaps a rededication of the philosophy of interscholastic athletics in the school district. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, that interscholastic athletics is an integral part of the educational process. And I think we need everyone to understand that and how it can benefit all kids. I truly believe it's not just for the super jock, so to speak, or I think it can be so beneficial for a lot of kids. And perhaps it would be beneficial for the district and perhaps in their committee to start with a mission statement. What are we about? What is our goal? What do we need to do? How do we take care of kids? Just for some suggestions. Okay. And then there were a few other things. Again, some of these may be philosophical in terms of presentation, but again, I try to look at the big picture, and it's all about kids, as we all know. So I would offer to you to consider a reevaluation, if you will, of the roles and the responsibilities of athletic personnel, mainly what the district refers to as faculty managers in each of the buildings. I found that all of these folks, and they're all fine people, are teaching, if not full teaching schedules, 3/4 of a teaching schedule. That's tough to do. That's tough to do, and then perform the duties of, in your terms, faculty manager. I think you need to really reevaluate that whole position. And there may be a lot of possibilities out there, that reconfiguration, so to speak. One thing that I did put at most of your places is a professional development booklet from the NIAAA, which is the National Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. I think, and Mike Gavlik would probably agree with me, I think the position of athletic director is probably one of the most misunderstood positions in the world. And for the most part, I think people are not sure what we do, but I can tell you that one school that I worked at, the principal referred to me as the principal of athletics because we essentially do everything a principal does, only in an athletic arena. We deal with all levels of law. We deal with hiring. We deal with evaluation. We deal with scheduling, transportation, discipline, you name it. So I offer to you the NIAAA information as you review the position of athletic personnel, the faculty manager more specifically, to consider having those folks become CAA certified athletic administrators. And I know some of them are already very involved. Karen Arnold at Langley is very involved in the State Athletic Directors Association. I see Mike every year at the AD's conference in March. So there are some folks that are becoming involved in pursuing their certification, but I encourage you to follow through with that and encourage those folks to do so. I mentioned the Couples Stadium facility, which is, in my opinion, a premier facility. It's beautiful. The press box is amazing. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, I said to Mike on the tour that I'd like to rent this and live in here. But it is a premier facility, and I think that facility needs to be used to the max. I think it needs any opportunity that games can be scheduled in there, whether it be football or soccer, or eventually down the road if the school district takes on lacrosse can be played there. I think that facility needs to be used to the maximum and allow as many students to benefit from using that facility as possible. I listed the City League and the PIAA district as PIAA District 8. And again, from some of the responses that I saw from some of the student athletes, again, mentioning about playing outside the city, I think, again, that needs to be looked at. I don't know what direction to advise you to go in. I think that has to come internally through discussions and conversation about that, but I would suggest that you take a look at that. And then the last thing I listed were perceptions, philosophy, and purpose. And again, I mentioned about this a little bit earlier, and I don't mean to be offensive. I don't want to offend anybody, but just my perception from my visits, from interviews, from the questionnaires, from the data I collected, I got the sense that interscholastic athletic programs functioned as a necessary routine rather than had meaning and purpose. And I don't want that to sound cruel or harsh or offensive. But again, it goes to that whole big picture thing that I talked about earlier, and how interscholastic athletics can be so beneficial to so many kids. And so I think it would be a good idea for the district just to kind of step back and, again, through the committee process, take a look at those things. Okay, next. And just a couple things. You have a great opportunity here, and again, I commend you for what you've done. And now we can move forward, and I think we need to move forward. And again, I reiterate that Title IX is not a sports law; it's an education law. Interscholastic athletics is an integral part of education. This is not going to be easy, folks. I think probably some of you can feel that now. There's a lot of challenges. But start somewhere, and I think you are. And continue to move forward. And I always look at it as a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you do absolutely nothing. And the other end of the spectrum, you do everything possible on this earth. As far as Title IX compliance, you obviously want to be moving down that end of the spectrum to where you can do everything possible. But start somewhere. I think you serve to be a model for schools across the state, if not across the country. Plan now, begin now. Take the steps to begin to move towards compliance. And it's educate, educate, educate. And a piece of all this is to educate folks about what the law is and what it is not. And again, I commend you for your vision and your foresight, your initiative, and I am so happy. I'm just so pleased that you, and honored that you asked me to come in and look at your programs, and I certainly offer my services from this point forward and anything I can do to help you out. So I thank you for your time. Will we have questions?
Yeah, I think what we had another section with this that Mr. Lopez is going to give you not a full district. Sorry, we had another section that Mr. Lopez is not going to give you a full district response, but just a brief.
Very quickly. First of all, we want to thank Penny Packer for working with us, because she's worked with us really closely over this time frame. She's talked with Michael more than me and Amy Rankin, and really sort of worked this through constantly. And so we just thank you for just the time and effort and energy and heart that you put into this, because we're going to use this, and so we really appreciate what you've done. So really quickly, what we've done to date. So prior to even receiving the Title IX report, the superintendent had already began to establish a work plan around athletics with the Pathways to the Promise Committee work. And so that work was beginning prior to this report. And also, on March 22nd, I met with all of the coaches in the district to discuss the philosophy of athletics and to discuss the things that we should be doing as a district and how we represent the district as athletics, because athletics is an integral part of education. It is not simply a space in which students play sports, but truly it is about these young people becoming whole people. And so the superintendent has recognized that through the Pathways to the Promise work, and we sort of began this conversation with the coaches on March 22nd, even before we received Ms. Penny Packer's report. So this is what we've done since we received it. So the Solicitor's Office and Amy Rankin and the team met last week after receiving the report and began to compile a summary of the findings, and many of the things that Ms. Penny Packer referred to, we sort of documented and sort of laid out in a grid for us to sort of look at. Well, we decided that there were 3 streams of work, and you said action plan. But there are 3 streams of work that we know that we need to be doing at this point in time. The first stream is immediate action. And that is looking at our scheduling of facilities and practices and games right now, and reviewing what we're doing now, and truly sort of making equitable changes around that right now, because that's what we would call a low-hanging fruit. So that can be immediately sort of acted upon. The second active stream is to sort of review our internal processes for what we need to address the disparities. And I listed sort of things at the bottom that Ms. Penny Packer referred to: an inventory of facilities and equipment by the Director of Athletics, principals, faculty, managers, and coaches, looking at all of our internal protocols to sort of see what and how our protocols measure up to the findings that Ms. Penny Packer put in her report. So that's the second sort of stream of work. But the third stream of work is really the big work, and that's addressing the systemic issues that were identified in the report. And we're recommending that we start an athletic program task force that looks at the systemic issues, particularly the participation in athletics by the young women within the district, to sort of really look to address how we can better meet the needs of the young people in our schools. And so a task force that consists of central office personnel, administrators, coaches, parents, students, community members, all of those folk, sort of put together, look to dig deep into the report to make substantive recommendations for action based upon all of the constraints that Ms. Penny Packer identified: financial constraints, the things that we know are part of our work every day, sort of to dig deeper into that. And so those are the 3 streams of work that we've committed to as a result of the report. And now it's open for questions and comments.
Thank you both for that report, especially your work on this, Ms. Penny Packer. I would like to open it up first to Mr. Brooklyn.
Just a couple of quick questions. Mr. Lopez, you mentioned this task force. You have not put it together at this point, or is this just something you're discussing in terms of the athletic community athletic task force?
So we have not put together completely. There is a committee that was formed by the superintendent with respect to looking at athletic issues overall as a result of the Pathways to the Promise work. We know that those works definitely have to come together around a plan and program and an action plan. And so we're still working on what that task force, and you will be on that task force this time. Yes.
I just want to stand on top of the table and to encourage this administration to take advantage of the opportunity on the community level. There are tons of former students some have moved on into semi-pros, pro athletics, doing very well, who would love to get into this system to just serve. Do not pass up the opportunity. There are some who I've tried as the member of the District 8 or the board's representative on the District 8 committee. I tried to get one individual, he runs a track program in the city, loves this district. Mark, have you thought about this? He's giving me tidbits about doing everything, but we only have X amount of positions for community representation. That's where you can win. And and I say make it a big deal. Let's have a big press conference and maybe solicit a little questionnaire for them to sign, or where they can come to a public hearing and tell us what their qualifications are, and somehow just go overboard. You will be surprised at who would express an interest in serving. I have at least 10 names that I'll be passing over to you as individuals. I know of at least 3 guys who attended Pittsburgh Public Schools in the last 10 years who've had their brief time in the NFL and are here. One is, I think, trying to get into the coaching system, but our system is tough to come back, and we're not going to get into that why, but it's tough on becoming a coach. You can go and play professional football, but you can't come back and coach here because of systems that we have in place. And so these individuals would love to serve. My second question is, your committee and the staffs, the committee that you put together with the staff to begin addressing these, I want to know the order of things in relationship to the District 8 committee. You are working with, or your findings will then be channeled to us as a District 8. We will then form that into a policy to move forward to present to the board, or what is your vision on the relationship between your work, your finding, and the District 8's work, and where we fit in?
So if I'm to understand your question, first I want to understand your question. Your question is, there's an existing District 8 committee.
That's right.
That sort of governs athletics within the city of Pittsburgh.
That's correct.
Would this task force be a part of that committee or be separate from the committee? Is that your question?
Yes, so what is your vision on how it will interact with it? Now let me just tell you what I think should happen, and that is the committee, as well as the findings of the staff working on some of the recommendations, should eventually be presented to the District 8 committee for us to then add, delete, and then, if necessary, form into some kind of recommendation / policy to be presented to the board for a vote. And that's my understanding of it. I'd like to know what yours is.
I don't think there's any real difference in the understandings. I just think that there would be separate bodies, and there would be definitely an avenue by which we vet those findings with the group who actually handles the work first, and bringing that to the superintendent who can make recommendations to.
Here's the thing that I'm concerned. I just don't want it to be a two-headed tiger where there are 2 tigers giving recommendations, and then somehow the administration has to make a decision which one has the largest teeth to consider. And I don't want to get into that kind of contest. I think the District 8 committee was put together for that exact purpose. So I just think it's a wonderful opportunity, especially if the district embraces it. And then if you would find a way to make sure that this is a community-led kind of effort, I think you will be surprised at the results on what you would get. The final question, and I just drew a blank because I will have to leave. I'm so sorry. Is there anything coming before us this month on these recommendations in terms of the policy? So this is pretty much an informational kind of, okay. And then finally, Mr. Gabak, I see you back as well. findings here again and how it works with us. What happens there? Now, I have not attended. I think I missed our last meeting or last two meetings, but remember I have to do silly things like work. And day off is a loss in personal day vacation. Your meetings are during the day. But what happens? How do we handle this? These are recommendations that we use as pretty much a roadmap for us as a District 8 committee to move forward, or as information for us to pick and choose as we decide to move forward. What's your understanding of what we should do?
May I respond to that?
Oh.
What we anticipate doing, obviously, we had to present this information to the board before we would present to the District 8 committee. But my understanding would be the District 8 committee would have access to the same information as the board has had this evening, as well as recommendations. And so, as we think about the intersection of the District 8 committee and the task force, it's likely, it would be my assumption that there would be a member or two members, or we have to pick a number, of the District 8 committee that served on the task force. That would be part of the representation on the task force, as well as community, students, and others, parents and others. And so once the task force decides on its action plan related to some of these recommendations, we would certainly want to make sure that the District 8 committee was informed of those and had opportunity to respond, suggest, and then when that information would then come forward to the superintendent, who would then bring it back to the board.
Okay, Doctor, I'm confused because the way you explained it there would really not be the need for the District 8 committee, because it sounds like this new task force would be pretty much moving forward, identifying issues and addressing things here, and then eventually share them with the District 8. I just wanted to be very clear that this committee is in place, and I think that we should find a way to empower them. They've been in existence, have only been on it for maybe 2 years, but they do good work and hard work. We can't or we shouldn't reinvent the wheel. If this panel somehow wants to work with it, I don't want to confuse the public in thinking that this new task force now is going to begin to address the issues of athletics in the district when District 8 is already addressing those. And I just don't want them to get into a contest.
Yeah, and I very much agree. We don't want two groups going forward. The task force is temporary. The task force will come together, and frankly, when we do task force things, if possible, we like to just contain it, and we have a very short time frame. This task force will meet. This is not going to be an ongoing group that would exist after, and I'll pick, let's say, 3 months. There might be a period of 2 or 3 months this task force would meet, develop an action plan, and that's the end of the task force is then disbanded. So it's not that we're trying to set up a quasi-District 8 committee on the side, whereas the District 8 committee is permanent.
Well, we can talk about it a little later, but it is confusing because if you're doing some of the things that the committee is doing, then then we get into who's on first and who has the authority to make its recommendation to its staff, eventually coming before the board. Now, if this committee would agree to work with and underneath the leadership of Mr. Gavak and the committee, that's athletics. That's where it should be tied into. Look, I've attended them. These folks are serious about athletics, and I just think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to work together on it. I don't know if there's necessarily a need. It would be great if we said, hey, as an ad hoc committee of the District 8, that we're forming a community athletic advisory committee just for the sole purpose of addressing these issues. That understanding is a little clearer. It's coming through District 8. District 8 will be responsible for it, and all of those things will be channeled through them, and it's the right place for it to be, in my opinion. So that's the way I see it. I just don't want us to, if you're addressing athletics, you already have them in place. Let's use them. Let's make a separate thing. Find extra seats for the community thing. That's great. I think that part is great, but it can look like this committee that you're forming here, since it's made up of mostly staff, that they may be in a better position to get their recommendations heard before the board, before the District 8 committee. And that's what I see. I mean, I'm more than willing to talk to you about it at a later date, but if you could just rethink that and make sure we empower the committee, that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that I hear you around the issue of thinking through very carefully what the relationship is between the two, but I wouldn't want anyone to go away thinking we're thinking of setting up a staff committee to deal with this issue, because frankly, my guess will be that staff will be in the minority on the committee, because we're talking about community people, we're talking about students and parents, and they would be the bulk of the representation of the task force.
Thank you. Ms. Fink? It's coming out of it. But for my own personal clarification, when you were discussing interscholastic athletics and clubs, are they not counted as the same thing?
Clubs do come under the law, as does any program in your school. How we would evaluate it in terms of being a part, a piece of the interscholastic athletic program, it's kind of one of those gray areas, so to speak. And how we would evaluate intramurals, although I did not see evidence of any intramurals at any of the schools. I think the key with the club sport issue is the direction of the club, and will it at some point be elevated to varsity status? I think that's the key with counting it as part of the compliance framework.
Are cheerleaders and dance teams part of the compliance?
They're not counted in the proportionality numbers. They're considered a support group. So cheerleaders would not be counted as a sport, so to speak.
My daughter on the cheerleader and my daughter on the dance team would very much be insulted.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of conversation about that, and there have been challenges at the college levels with regards to competitive cheer. And in September of '08, the Department of Education, OCR, came out with clarification on the criteria that would be used to dictate whether something was a sport or not. Does it have a defined season? Does it have a schedule? Is it sponsored by your state association? Those types of things. So there have been schools across the country who have used that criteria to make the argument to count competitive cheer. And have not been challenged to this point as far as I know. But the sideline cheer would be a support group.
And the cheerleaders practice daily through football and basketball season. But aside from that, then, if I understood you to be compliant, what would be acceptable is a 3 to 5% disparity. Did I understand that correctly?
That's generally what the OCR would look at.
And so the sheer number of players on a football team, what could a school possibly offer if cheerleading and dance team and that type of thing don't count? What could a school possibly offer to close that gap?
You've hit a point that has been, I don't want to say controversial, but substantial proportionality over the last, in June, 38 years has been a point of contention with regards to the compliance with the law. So, yeah, schools do battle that. But I think the bottom line is that the three-pronged test is a mechanism, if you will, to encourage schools to generate interest in females to participate in athletics. It's breaking down gender stereotypes is really the bottom line. It is my opinion that interest doesn't develop in a vacuum. It evolves from experience and opportunity. And it's about opportunity and creating those opportunities and educating young females about the benefits of sports. Girls want the same benefits from participating in athletics that guys do. I mean, we want the teamwork, the camaraderie, the fitness. all those things. And the statistics are out there. The females who typically participate in athletics, pregnancy rates are lower, they're less likely. Drug use, you go down the line with the research. I mean, it's all there. So that three-pronged test is that mechanism to help break down the stereotypes, encourage females to participate, get schools to find ways to communicate that to girls, and really does start at the grassroots level. It starts, very young kid,
Right. And I very much agree with everything you're saying, because traditionally, even in the communities, the male sports are given preference over female sports. And it's something that women have been arguing about for a long time that I'm just aware of. But when you get to that number thing, I just can't even fathom how you could do it.
Yeah,
now that said, as long as we're offering 2 basketball teams and you know what I mean, all of that.
And it's making that effort, again, to try to move down that spectrum, to try to move towards compliance. What are the things that we can do, even at the very young levels, to help educate our females about the benefits of participating in not just sports.
Important reporter here, because I think your last 5 minutes was phenomenal. I think you really summed everything up, and I would like to take a shot, but since I'm sitting next to one on my left and I'm looking at one across the table, and there's probably one on my back, I won't say anything about attorneys. I just think you did a phenomenal job on the law, and it's really something that should be written. I'm glad you asked the question, because I just think you've really put it together. I think a couple things that are phenomenal takeaways. That Title IX is really an education law, not an athletic law. I think you did a tremendous job. I really mean this. To Dr. Lane and to Mr. Roosevelt for bringing you in here, you're right. I mean, there were risks in bringing you in. But I think the education you do for a school board, not just for the staff, is incredibly important. And it is an evolving process. But colleges and universities have been able to do this. Question, and I would not, you may not want to answer this publicly, I'm comfortable with that, you can get back to us. If there are any models of schools in the Commonwealth, I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate because you have 2 large ones, one on either end of the state, and one is 5 times the size of us, and then everything drops down accordingly. It'd be good to see. It would really be good for us to see. I mean, in your neck of the woods, it's probably more the suburban districts than it is the urban districts, right?
I'm going to choose my words very carefully.
Okay. You don't have to answer.
I do want to make a comment.
Okay.
I do want to make a comment because I think it's important. Right now, when I look across the state and knowing what I know about some of the other areas you're talking about, you are the model. Pittsburgh Public Schools is the model. In my opinion, you're way ahead of the curve. The mere fact that I'm sitting here and we're having this conversation, this is historical in my opinion, for this to be happening. That's my opinion. So I can't commend you folks enough. I mean, this is a great thing.
It's really, it's good. It's good to hear. No, I didn't. I'm taken back. Let me go on in a couple of things that I want to be a little clear on. And again, what you've left us is pretty amazing. You didn't, I mean, when you talked about the PIA District 8 versus a WPIL, I think, which is one of the standing arguments, you really do not weigh in on it. You see that as an internal decision.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I have the authority, or I don't think that's really not my position or authority to do that. I would suggest that the district looks at that. That obviously is very political, for lack of a better word. It's a very deep and intense dynamic. I think my thought on that came from the whole issue with the number of competitions and the quality of competition and those types of things. So that may be something down the road you'll look at and just talk about.
But and I just checked with our historian, I'm sorry for the sidebar, but you know, she's 30-some years on this board. One of the reasons I believe the district went into District 8 was that we were really looking out for the benefit of the kids, and our academic requirement was a little higher. Let me go, if I may, to Dr. Lane and Mr. Lopez for a moment. When you put together this task force, was the intent a result of the Title IX audit?
I think it was kind of a two-stage process. Mr. Lopez described the fact that the superintendent had already asked us to begin looking at athletics. And so that kind of got started. And then that was, previous to us actually getting any response yet from Ms. Pennypacker. But we believe now that it's fortunate we started that because this can now inform that work as well. So I think the timing actually has worked out for us well.
So it really is a meshing of where you're going with the district, not just on the pure academic side, but, and again, I want to pick up on your terms, but on the related academic side, for instance, with athletics.
Exactly. The whole promise readiness aspect, we know the academics are incredibly important. But just as we've heard, and I think all of us have seen the statistics around the level of engagement that kids can have around school, because for a lot of kids at school, the academics is the way to get them engaged at all. And then you have a chance to work with them on, can you read, can you write, can you do some of these other kinds of things, because they're interested, and often it's the coach is the one that gets kids really engaged. Because good coaches can make a phenomenal difference in the lives of kids. And, I've seen it with my own kid. We cannot, pull those two pieces apart.
Thank you. And again, I thank you for coming in, and I want you, you don't have to respond to this, I'll respond to you. You were not suggesting that Mr. Lopez is of the work.
No, she wasn't. OCR, are they able to sanction us because we don't have enough young ladies that are interested in sports?
Well, I'm not the OCR. Again, I'm an independent consultant, and if someone would file a complaint with the OCR, they would come in and look at, again, everything I've looked at. The ultimate penalty, if you will, for non-compliance is loss of federal funding. However, I can tell you, and I mean, it's no secret, to date, some 38 years later, nobody's lost their federal funding. However, what it does is it creates huge exposure for the district. Unfortunately, sometimes folks go by the way of a private lawsuit as well, so you certainly don't want that to happen. If the OCR were to come into the school, they would be here for a very long time. So they would come in and tell you what you need to do, and they'd give you a timeline to do it.
But if we don't have enough young ladies that are willing to do it, you see, there's a catch-22 in the law.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Right. But they would tell you what you would need to do to meet their satisfaction. And I can't predict at this point what that exactly would be.
I'll just make a statement. I think it's not going to help the education of anybody when you're forced to do something like this. Because like you said, sports is part of education. But if you're forced to participate, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to be happy. And that's, I think it's more important than anything else.
Well, I think, not to interrupt you, but I think an important piece would be the survey piece. And constantly talk to kids and just keep monitoring that prong, that third prong, for obvious reasons.
And Mr. Eichner and I have similar opinions of lawyers and laws and things. So that was sort of my little jab at their law. Also, and this is a question for a lawyer, I guess, but since the charter schools are actually Pittsburgh Public Schools, how do they fit into this whole Title IX of it?
No, we didn't include the charter schools. I'm just, well, I sincerely apologize. Mike probably knows more about this than I do.
Hello, everyone. Charter school students
Can you identify yourself, please?
Sorry, Mike Gallup, Director of Athletics. The charter school students are permitted under the PIAA to play for their home school of residency. So in that regards, they could have been counted into our numbers as far as who was participating, because those students are afforded that opportunity under the charter school law.
So it's just another way that the charter schools can take advantage of the public schools. And I'm not going to go down that road. Sorry. They are, but again, it's something that if I'm running a school, part of my school is going to be the athletic program. But I don't have to have that athletic program. I have to pay for that because somebody else is paying for it, so I can make more money. Anyway, that's another issue altogether. You mentioned the booster clubs. I need to get my head around this. All the money is supposed to go into one pot and then everybody divides it up? What did you mean by that?
Well, there are obviously different ways to run your booster clubs. I can tell you that PSBA strongly urges schools to have one umbrella booster club, and essentially doing what you just said. The booster club issue is a hot button, not just here, everywhere. I know at my school we have a semi-one booster club, but that we also have our splinter groups as well. And we just passed the board policy just last year and a half ago, to help us govern those booster clubs. Because again, even though your mind wants to think that these folks are operating on their own, doing their own thing, supporting our programs, again, anything that they bring into the program, if it causes a disparity, the school would be responsible to correct. So I would say to you, as per PSBA, if you can run the one booster club umbrella methodology, that's the preferred way. And have some
I think that coach's piece, or the coaching piece, is very important to this whole conversation, because that's the master motivator, that's the one who develops the athletes, that's the one who develops the relationship. And speaking of contractual issues, it seems that our hands are tied somewhat in providing the best coaches to our athletes. Now, could that be challengeable in any way, that you're denying students an opportunity to excel?
I would think, in theory, I would not be the person to challenge it. It would probably take, the OCR coming in to look at that, or an attorney, maybe the in-house attorneys would investigate that. That could be a possibility.
Yeah, I'd say that in a sense, because my understanding is that the coach, like with the title or name on the person has to come from the school first, and then come from the district second. If there's no other takers, then folks can volunteer. So it's like 2 steps before you're assuring yourself of getting a coach in basketball that has experience and can coach that sport. Now they can come off the street, or they can come out the school, or they can come out the district, or from wherever, but we're denying our students, or not availing them of that opportunity by the law that's in place now. So I have definite problems with that. And you can just look around the district. Those coaches that have had successful programs were former players that know the sport, that did fairly well or came up through the district, and those coaches that take care of their players all year long have successful programs. We'll see them at barbecues, we'll see them at functions, social functions, you'll see them doing community events, they'll be mentoring, they'll be doing all sorts of things. So it's easy to see the successful programs versus the ones where the kids came and scored 10 points and a half. Last night was a good example of you can start off bad and end up well, but then last night was an excellent example of how far we've come, and the fact that you can pack the Alamo Dome with folks watching, the girls' championship. And that's, that's a football stadium full of people. So.
And girls are dunking now too. So the evolution continues.
Careful with that.